Hi, folks. You should be aware, I hope you are, that the language of poetry is metaphor. All of those deeper meanings that words take on that allow us to create allegories, to reach for things by allusions and all of those connections and stuff like that. Well, where does our mind's ability to use metaphor, create with it, and create come from? Interesting question. I don't have any wonderful answers on that, but I have some nice grounds to play with it via psychologist Carl Gustav Jung and via Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem, Kubla Khan. So let's go there. First off, some notions about psychology, early ones from dear psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, had the notion that our ideas arise out of the subconscious or unconscious, and suggested our thoughts are dominated by our id, creature of pure impulse and appetite, has sex on its mind all the time and not very much else. The id's held in check by the superego. That's all the messages we receive from culture and society, everything that tells us to behave ourselves. And ourself, our ego, me, must mediate between the id and the superego. And according to Freud, our dreams and the metaphors of our art are the id rising to the surface and trying to express itself. Damn it, I hope there's more in my brain than that. I really seriously do. So, let's move to Carl Gustav Jung, who's pupil of Freud, who would suggest we've got a little bit more there. Quite a bit more in terms of that human subconscious or unconscious. It's where much of our thought process takes place. You've noticed, no doubt, how ideas kind of rise from the surface full form after we've studied a problem. Calculation, whatever goes into this, takes place somewhere below the surface, like our CPU's hidden deep inside or what have you. And Jung claims that humans have a collective unconscious in us, a repository of ideas. In more modern terms, more modern form, we could connect that collective unconscious to the structure of the process, our hardwiring. So our language and its metaphors, then according to Jung, are based on archetypal ideas, universal metaphors, universal connections inside and such as that. For example, if you're going downstream on a river, archetypally, you're following the course of life, flowing from the source, your beginning, on through growth, maturity, down to the mouth of the river to the end, and what have you. Our dreams and art, then, are metaphoric accounts of our understanding of the world, or at least some little piece of it. Now, get to our poem. Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote about how Kubla Khan came to him in a dream. You have notes on that in your textbook. He also claimed it was a fragment, beginning of a long narrative, and he lost the rest of the thread. Well, I rather doubt the second part of that claim. Kubla Khan strikes me as a very complete poem, but one so revolutionary in style and content that it would not have been understood by his contemporaries. For us, oh yes, this fits. Beginning of the 19th century, very beginning of the Romantic period. What's this? It doesn't look logical. Well, forget it, Alexander Pope. No, it isn't. It's something else. The imagery of it, well, it can be read as a Freudian sex dream. That's been done, very commonly done, and frankly, it bores me. It can also be read as a Jungian account of the creative process. Well, you've got the full 9 yards on that. We've done, I have for you, line by line, close reading, Jungian style of that poem up on canvas. You should get to that and work with it. Now then, things that a Jungian reading of that poem brings out. One is a concept of creative dualism. This comes out of another idea that's much, much later than Mr. Coleridge. This comes from the late 19th century from Friedrich Nietzsche, this notion that creativity has two elements. One is the Apollonian, all of these elements that are logical and structured, rational. We see them in the poem when Kubla Khan measures out his 5 miles of fertile ground and we're under the sunlight and the river is lazily meandering and all of these things. And then there's the Dionysian, the new, the dynamic, everything that rises from that sunless sea and returns to it. It bursts to the surface in this deep chasm with all of these wildness going on, hail rebounding and a woman wailing for the demon lover and all the rest of that. That's Dionysian. That river has to come out of there before it reaches the surface, before it completes its task and then returns down to that sunless sea, returns to a quieter emptiness underneath because the idea has completed itself and run its course. Now, other things in the poem, sublimated or repressed elements of the personality. Sublimation may be good. These things go underneath, they're an undercurrent, they're part of you. Repression is bad, unhealthy. And folks, traditionally or stereotypically, we think of certain female attributes. We think of emotion and some kinds of aesthetic values and such as female. A male should integrate them or sublimate them into his personality. If he does so, he's healthy. If he represses them, shoves them down forcibly, that's unhealthy and you get, a most unpleasant person. The animus with the U.S. on the other side represents male characteristics, logic, self-assertion, and such, that may be integrated or sublimated into a female's consciousness, perception, and behavior. Again, integrated and sublimated is healthy. Or they may be repressed, and this is the unhealthy thing and makes an unhealthy person. Now, this is a male poem in terms of the narrator, so what appears? The anima. She appears twice. First, she's at this beginning of the creative process or the beginning of its appearance up in the outer world, and there she's this woman wailing for her demon lover, uncontrolled, dangerous, fierce. At the end of the poem, she's back again, and what is she here? Different figure. Here we have the Abyssinian maid, the damsel with a dulcimer. Music, the music that has been created, the completed process, all of these things. Beautiful, complete understanding. And so we go from this wailing beginning to the completed ending. And at the end then, after this visit with the damsel with the dulcimer, the narrator realizes he has been to this perfect realm of creativity, place of dreams, place where all arises, this unconscious. And there the narrator has seen perfect beauty. Does he bring it back with him? Of course not. You can't bring it back with you. Just like you can't walk back into Plato's cave and tell everybody how things are, having seen it all. If you remember it all, you're in there in the dark trying to refocus your eyes while everybody's thinking you're mad as a hatter. And indeed, the audience finds our narrator thoroughly mad and dangerous. Weave a circle round him thrice. Why? Because he's glimpsed magic. It fades. There's too much in our subconscious for us to safely bring it all to the surface. Those creative glimpses can rise and create Kubla Khan's beautiful, perfect world. But then the new things, the river must fall back to the sunless sea, back to its place of quiet. And that, folks, is our Jungian reading of Kubla Khan. And as that goes with however you read poetry, that is, whether you want young or not, the language of poetry is metaphor. Whether that metaphor comes out of some kind of hard wiring, or it's a product of our culture and society, or is so unique, so individual, pulls out of the connections that we individually make, whatever those source, literature works by tapping into those meanings beneath the surface, the metaphors, and bringing them forth to flower. And so we see in literature metaphor and its related devices, symbol, allusions, all of these things. Okay, folks,